holographic display flickered with ghostly fragments of destruction. Scattered data points danced across the screen, each representing the final moments of another civilization. Captain Elena Rodriguez leaned forward, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns of light and shadow. The observation deck of the research vessel Horizon was eerily quiet. Most of the crew avoided this room, unable to bear the weight of endless recorded devastation. But Elena was different. Where others saw only chaos, she saw something else. A rhythm, a hidden structure beneath the apparent randomness of the Void Swarm's attacks. Her dark eyes narrowed, reflecting the shifting holographic displays. The latest transmission came from the Zarakon homeworld, a once thriving civilization of crystal spires and advanced quantum technologies. Now it was nothing more than a field of cosmic debris, scattered across light years like broken glass. "Computer," she spoke softly, "overlay the Zarakon attack pattern with the previous 3 recorded encounters." The hologram shifted, multiple attack sequences blending into a complex web of trajectories. Most analysts had dismissed these as random strikes, but Elena saw something different. Subtle connections began to emerge, micro-patterns that suggested more than random destruction. Soft chime interrupted her concentration. Commander David Chen entered the observation deck, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "You've been here for 16 hours straight, Elena," he said, more concern than reprimand in his voice. She didn't look up. "Look at this," Elena pointed to the holographic display. "The attack vectors. They're not random." Chen studied the display, skepticism etched across his features. As the Horizon's second-in-command, he had seen countless attempts to find meaning in the Void Swarm's seemingly senseless attacks. "Those look like standard dispersal patterns to me," he remarked. "No," Elena insisted, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "Watch the quantum resonance points. There's a predictive algorithm buried in these attack sequences." The ship's computer began running her proposed analysis. Lines of probability began to weave through the attack patterns, revealing something extraordinary. Each attack wasn't just destruction, it was a calculated probe, gathering information with surgical precision. Outside the observation deck's massive windows, the infinite darkness of space stretched endlessly. Distant starlight seemed to dim in comparison to the holographic display's intensity. The Void Swarm had already consumed 17 advanced civilizations in the past solar cycle. Humanity had only recently been accepted into the Galactic Confederation, and many saw them as naive newcomers. Elena knew they were wrong. Her background in xenoarchaeology and strategic analysis gave her a unique perspective. While other species saw the attacks as pure destruction, she recognized them as something far more calculated. Each strike was gathering information, testing defenses, learning. "It's like a massive distributed intelligence," she muttered. More to herself than to Chen. "They're not just attacking, they're understanding." The computer completed its analysis. Probability graphs erupted across the display, confirming Elena's suspicions. The Void Swarm wasn't just destroying civilizations, it was systematically mapping their defensive capabilities, their technological weaknesses, their potential resistance. Chen's skepticism began to crack. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Not impossible," Elena corrected. "Just unprecedented." A urgent communication channel opened. The Galactic Confederation's emergency frequency crackled with static and fear. Another civilization was under attack. But now, Elena understood something no one else had discovered. The Void Swarm could be predicted. It could be understood. And most importantly, it could be stopped. Her hand moved to the communication panel. She would need a team, the most unconventional minds humanity could assemble. Because conventional thinking had already failed 17 times. The universe was about to learn that humanity was anything but conventional. Outside the ship's windows, stars continued their silent vigil. The cosmic dance of destruction and potential continued, waiting for humanity's next move. The briefing room hummed with nervous energy. Elena stood at the center, her presentation flickering to life on the holographic display. Around her sat the most unconventional team ever assembled by Human Intelligence Services. Dr. Akira Chen looked like he'd rather be in a quantum laboratory than a strategy meeting. His fingers tapped an irregular rhythm on the tablet, complex equations dancing beneath his touch. Beside him, Maya Okonkwo leaned forward, her eyes intense with focused curiosity. As a behavioral psychologist specializing in complex adaptive systems, she saw patterns where others saw chaos. Retired Commander Jack Sullivan sat at the far end of the table, one artificial leg crossed over the other. His weathered face told stories of countless battles, each line a testament to survival against impossible odds. He'd been called out of retirement for this specific mission, a last-ditch effort to understand the incomprehensible. "The Void Swarm is not a traditional enemy," Elena began, her voice cutting through the room's tension. "It's a collective intelligence that learns, adapts, and evolves with each encounter." The holographic display shifted, showing fragmented attack patterns from 17 destroyed civilizations. Most military strategists had seen these as random destruction. Elena's team saw something entirely different. "Watch the progression," Dr. Chen interrupted, his fingers swiping across his tablet. A series of complex algorithms materialized in the air. Each attack follows a quantum learning pattern. It's not just destroying, it's collecting information. Maya leaned closer. "Behavioral mapping," she murmured. "Each civilization provides a new data point for understanding resistance, technological capabilities, psychological breaking points." Commander Sullivan let out a low whistle. "They're not fighting a war. They're conducting the most extensive research project in galactic history." The Galactic Confederation's leadership had dismissed their initial report. Politicians and military strategists from dozens of advanced species had laughed. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Alliance, barely understood, often underestimated. Elena knew they were making a mistake. "We need a completely different approach," she continued. The holographic display transformed, showing multiple layers of potential defensive strategies. Traditional warfare assumes a linear response. The Void Swarm doesn't think linearly. Dr. Chen pulled up a series of quantum probability models. It's more like a distributed neural network. Each attack node learns independently, but also shares information with the collective. Maya's contribution was equally critical. Psychological. Warfare won't work in the traditional sense. We can't break a collective intelligence through individual psychological manipulation. We need to understand its fundamental learning mechanism. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. Every previous attempt to combat the Void Swarm had failed because everyone was fighting the last battle, not anticipating the next one. Commander Sullivan broke the silence. "So how do we fight something that learns faster than we can attack?" Elena's smile was dangerous. By being completely unpredictable, the team began to work. Complex models emerged, combining quantum physics, behavioral psychology, strategic analysis, and pure human creativity. They weren't just developing a defense strategy. They were rewriting the fundamental understanding of collective intelligence. Outside the briefing room, the Galactic Confederation continued its panicked preparations. Evacuation protocols were being drafted. Entire star systems were being abandoned. Meanwhile, this small team of human specialists was doing something no one else had considered. They were trying to understand the enemy. As night fell across the research station, the team's work continued. Holographic displays flickered with impossible equations. Coffee mugs accumulated. Theories were proposed, challenged, dismantled, and rebuilt. The Void Swarm had consumed 17 civilizations. Each believed they were fighting for survival. They were wrong. They were providing data points for the next attack. Humanity was about to change that calculation. Commander Sullivan looked at Elena, a spark of something between respect and excitement in his eyes. "We're going to make history," he said. Elena's response was calm and certain. "No, we're going to save it." The research station's alert system screamed with unexpected intensity. A Void Swarm scout fleet had emerged from quantum slip space, targeting an isolated scientific outpost on the galactic rim. "This is our first real test," Elena announced, her voice steady despite the mounting tension. Dr. Chen's fingers flew across multiple holographic interfaces. Complex algorithms danced between quantum probability models and adaptive response matrices. Maya watched the behavioral patterns, her eyes tracking the most minute shifts in the collective intelligence's movement. Commander Sullivan stood at the tactical display, his artificial leg tapping a precise rhythm against the deck plating. "Standard protocols would call for immediate evacuation," he muttered. "We're going to do something else entirely." The scout fleet approached with terrifying precision. 17 previous encounters had shown a predictable pattern of systematic destruction, except this time humanity was ready to break every expectation. "Initiating unconventional response protocol," Elena commanded. What followed defied every known principle of space warfare. Instead of presenting a concentrated defensive formation, the human response team scattered their communication signals. Multiple low-power transmissions began broadcasting seemingly random data packets. To any traditional military strategist, it would look like complete chaos. To the Void Swarm, it was something far more dangerous. Dr. Chen had developed a series of quantum-entangled communication matrices that would read as pure noise to a conventional analysis. But each transmission contained subtle informational layers, psychological triggers designed to create cognitive dissonance within the collective. "Intelligence. They're trying to understand our response," Maya observed. Her fingers traced the incoming data streams, but were not giving them a coherent pattern to analyze. The scout fleet's initial approach began to waver. Its perfectly synchronized movement started to fragment. Micro-adjustments became increasingly erratic, as if the collective intelligence was experiencing something it had never encountered before. Genuine unpredictability. Commander Sullivan allowed himself a small smile. "We're not fighting," he said. "We're confusing them." Each transmission was a puzzle, a deliberate attempt to introduce uncertainty into a system that relied on absolute predictability. The human team wasn't just defending. They were conducting a massive psychological experiment in real time. The Void Swarm's scout ships began to drift. Their perfect geometric formation started to collapse. Quantum communication links became increasingly unstable. For the first time in 17 encounters, the collective intelligence showed signs of genuine uncertainty. "Now," Elena said softly. Precisely calculated energy burst erupted from the human defense platform. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. Instead, it was a complex quantum signal designed to temporarily disrupt the collective intelligence's communication network. The scout fleet suddenly stopped moving. Silence filled the research station's command center. "Did we just," Maya began, "defeat a Void Swarm attack without firing a single traditional weapon?" Dr. Chen completed her sentence. "Yes, exactly." The data began streaming in. 17 previous civilizations had met total destruction. This time, something different had happened. The scout fleet remained intact but completely non-functional. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply confused. Commander Sullivan let out a low whistle. "They've never encountered an enemy that fights like this." Elena's analysis was clinical. "We didn't fight. We introduced complexity into a system designed for absolute simplicity." The Galactic Confederation would receive their report soon. Most would not understand the significance of what had just occurred. But this small team of human specialists knew they had just changed everything. The Void Swarm had met an enemy it could not immediately understand. And in the vast, cold mathematics of collective intelligence, that was more dangerous than any weapon. Outside the research station's windows, stars continued their silent dance. Somewhere in the darkness, the Void Swarm was recalculating everything. It thought it knew about warfare, about resistance, about humanity. The Galactic Confederation's emergency chamber erupted in chaos. Holographic displays showed the imminent threat to the Nexus cluster, a critical hub of multiple advanced civilizations. 17 previous encounters had ended in total destruction. This time something different was about to happen. "We cannot commit human resources to this defense," argued Ambassador Krelax, a crystalline being from the Prism Collective. His multifaceted form shimmered with diplomatic indignation. "Your previous encounter was a statistical anomaly, Elena." Rodriguez stood at the center of the chamber, calm amid the rising panic. Behind her, Dr. Chen reviewed complex quantum models, while Maya analyzed potential psychological responses. Commander Sullivan stood like a sentinel, his artificial leg a testament to years of survival against impossible odds. "The Void Swarm is not just an enemy," Elena began. "It's a learning system, and we've learned how it learns." The chamber fell, silent. Her presentation began. Holographic displays showed their previous encounter, not as a combat report but as a complex study of collective intelligence disruption. Each transmission, each signal had been a carefully crafted puzzle designed to introduce uncertainty into a seemingly perfect system. Traditional defense models assume direct confrontation, Dr. Chen interjected. His fingers danced across holographic interfaces, revealing intricate probability matrices. "We're proposing something entirely different." The Nexus cluster was more than just a star system. It was a convergence of technological, cultural, and scientific achievements from multiple civilizations. Losing it would mean losing hope for the entire Galactic Alliance. Most species were preparing evacuation protocols. Massive ships stood ready to flee at the first sign of the Void Swarm's approach. The human team was preparing to fight. "We'll need complete autonomy," Elena told the Confederate Council. "Our strategy cannot be constrained by traditional military protocols." Ambassador Krelax bristled. "You suggest facing the most destructive force in galactic history with an untested approach?" Commander Sullivan's laugh was sharp. "We've already proven our method works." The Void Swarm arrived precisely as predicted. Quantum slip-space distortions announced its approach, a perfect geometric formation that had spelled doom for 17 previous civilizations. But this time was different. Instead of a concentrated, defensive line, the human response team deployed a network of quantum-entangled communication nodes. Each node broadcast signals that were simultaneously meaningless and meaningful, complex information hidden within apparent chaos. Maya's psychological models predicted the collective intelligence's response with terrifying accuracy. The Void Swarm's initial attack pattern began to fragment. Micro-adjustments became increasingly erratic. "They're trying to understand," Maya whispered. "But we're not giving them a consistent pattern to analyze." Dr. Chen's quantum algorithms created interference patterns that disrupted the collective's communication network, not by force but by introducing fundamental uncertainty into its decision-making process. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 17 minutes. Where previous encounters had resulted in total destruction, this engagement ended with the Void Swarm's scout fleet completely non-functional. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply confused. In the Confederate emergency chamber, holographic displays showed something unprecedented. The Void Swarm had encountered an enemy it could not immediately comprehend. Ambassador Krelax's crystalline form seemed to collapse slightly. "How?" he demanded. Elena's response was simple. "We didn't fight a war. We conducted an experiment in collective intelligence disruption." The implications were staggering. For the first time, a civilization had not just survived a Void Swarm encounter. They had fundamentally challenged its method of operation. Outside the chamber, stars continued their silent dance. Somewhere in the vast darkness, the Void Swarm was recalculating everything it thought it knew about resistance, about warfare, about humanity. The game had changed, and humanity had just become the most dangerous player in the galactic arena. The global research complex buzzed with unprecedented energy. What had begun as a small team's experimental approach was now transforming into a revolutionary field of study. Adaptive intelligence research centers sprang up across human territories, each dedicated to understanding the principles that had disrupted the Void Swarm's seemingly invincible collective. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, surrounded by representatives from every major galactic civilization. Her team had been called to share their breakthrough, a moment that would reshape understanding of conflict, intelligence, and survival. "We're not talking about a weapon," Elena explained, her voice calm and precise. "We're discussing a fundamental approach to understanding complex adaptive systems." Dr. Akira Chen stepped forward, pulling up intricate quantum models that danced with probability and uncertainty. Maya Okonkwo stood nearby, her behavioral analysis charts showing how psychological complexity could become a strategic advantage. The gathered scientists and military strategists represented species that had spent millennia developing advanced technologies. They had weapons that could shatter planets, communication systems that spanned entire star clusters. Yet they had never conceived of defense in the way humans now proposed. "Traditional defensive strategies assume a linear response," Maya explained. "The Void Swarm operates as a collective intelligence that learns from each encounter. Our approach introduces fundamental uncertainty into its learning process." Commander Jack Sullivan demonstrated adaptive communication protocols that could dynamically adjust faster than any known intelligence system. Each simulation showed how human unpredictability could become the most potent defensive mechanism in galactic history. Research facilities began producing a new generation of adaptive AI systems. These were not traditional artificial intelligences, but dynamic learning networks inspired by human psychological complexity. They could change, adapt, and respond in ways that defied traditional computational models. The Galactic Confederation's research grants flooded human research centers. Species that had previously viewed humanity as newcomers now looked with a mixture of fear and fascination. The team that had first confronted the Void Swarm became overnight legends. Dr. Chen's quantum communication models began revolutionizing entire fields of scientific research. Communication systems were redesigned to incorporate principles of uncertainty and adaptive response. What had been a defensive strategy was becoming a fundamental scientific breakthrough. "We're not just changing how we fight," Elena told a packed conference of galactic researchers. "We're changing how we understand intelligence itself." The implications stretched far beyond military applications. Medical research centers began exploring adaptive treatment protocols. Economic systems started incorporating more dynamic response mechanisms. Even artistic expression began to explore the principles of uncertainty and adaptive creativity. Maya's psychological research revealed something profound. The human ability to embrace uncertainty, to find creativity in chaos, was itself a form of intelligence that most species had never considered. The Void Swarm's collective intelligence relied on predictability. Humanity's strength lay in its fundamental unpredictability. Diplomatic channels began to shift. Where previous galactic interactions had been based on rigid protocols and predictable responses, human representatives introduced elements of creative problem-solving that left other species both frustrated and intrigued. Commander Sullivan oversaw the development of new training protocols. Military academies across human territories began teaching an entirely new approach to strategic thinking. It wasn't about overwhelming force, but about creating systems that could adapt faster than any enemy could predict. Research stations across human territories worked to understand the principles that had first disrupted the Void Swarm. Each breakthrough opened new possibilities. Each discovery challenged existing understanding of intelligence, conflict, and survival. The small team that had first confronted the Void Swarm watched as their experimental approach transformed into a galactic revolution. What had begun as a desperate attempt to survive was becoming something much larger, a fundamental reimagining of how intelligence could function. In research centers, diplomatic halls, and military academies, a new understanding was emerging. Humanity had done more than survive. They had introduced a new way of thinking to the entire galaxy. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter. Somewhere in the vast darkness, the Void Swarm was still calculating, still learning. But for the first time, it was no longer the only one. The combined fleet assembled unlike any military formation in galactic history. Sleek human vessels moved with fluid, unpredictable patterns between massive ships from a dozen different civilizations. Each vessel carried more than traditional weaponry. They carried the culmination of humanity's revolutionary approach to collective intelligence. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the flagship, her team surrounding her. Dr. Akira Chen monitored quantum communication networks. Maya Okonkwo analyzed real-time behavioral patterns. Commander Jack Sullivan managed tactical integration with allied forces. "This isn't a traditional battle," Elena announced to the assembled fleet commanders. Holographic displays showed their unprecedented strategy, a multi-layered approach that defied every known principle of space warfare. The Void Swarm's approach was visible on long-range scanners, a perfect geometric formation that had spelled doom for 17 previous civilizations. But this time, the galaxy was ready. Allied ships had been retrofitted with adaptive response systems developed by the human research team. Communication networks now incorporated quantum uncertainty protocols. Each vessel could dynamically adjust its approach faster than the collective intelligence could analyze. "Initiating first phase disruption," Dr. Chen called out. Waves of carefully crafted communication signals began broadcasting. These were not traditional weapons or jamming frequencies. They were complex information matrices designed to introduce cognitive dissonance into the Void Swarm's collective intelligence. Maya tracked the response in real time. "They're attempting to process," she observed, "but our signal complexity is preventing a coherent analysis." The battle unfolded unlike any previous encounter. Where traditional warfare would present a concentrated defensive line, the human-led fleet moved like a living organism. Ships danced between predictable patterns, creating waves of uncertainty that disrupted the Void Swarm's collective decision-making. Commander Sullivan coordinated with alien fleet commanders, species that had previously fought independently now, moved with a unity inspired by human strategic thinking. Each movement was a carefully calculated response, designed to maximize uncertainty. "They're learning," Dr. Chen muttered. "But we're learning faster." Quantum communication nodes created interference patterns that made the fleet's movements impossible to predict. Traditional combat algorithms became useless. The Void Swarm encountered an enemy that refused to follow any recognizable pattern of resistance. Elena watched the holographic display, seeing beyond the immediate tactical situation. This was more than a battle. It was a fundamental challenge to the nature of collective intelligence. Alien fleet commanders looked to the human vessels with a mixture of confusion and growing respect. The human approach wasn't about overwhelming force. It was about creating a dynamic system that could adapt faster than any enemy could comprehend. "Probability matrices are destabilizing," Maya announced. Her voice carried a sense of scientific excitement. "The collective intelligence is struggling to maintain its coherent response." The Void Swarm's perfect geometric formations began to fragment. Micro-adjustments became increasingly erratic. For the first time, the collective intelligence showed signs of genuine uncertainty. Dr. Chen's quantum models predicted each shift with terrifying accuracy. "We're not destroying them," he explained to the bridge crew. "We're fundamentally challenging their method of existence." Hours passed. What would have been a total destruction event in previous encounters became something entirely different. The Void Swarm's fleet became increasingly fragmented, its collective intelligence unable to process the constant stream of adaptive, unpredictable responses. Commander Sullivan allowed himself a small smile. "We're teaching them something they've never encountered," he said. "The value of individual creativity." As the battle progressed, something unprecedented happened. Parts of the Void Swarm's collective began to separate, to show signs of individual decision-making. The perfect collective was breaking down, confronted, with an approach it could not assimilate or understand. Elena watched the holographic display, understanding the profound implications. This was more than a military victory. This was a fundamental transformation of how intelligence could function. The stars outside seemed to hold their breath. Somewhere in the vast darkness, everything was changing. The final confrontation would not be a battle in any traditional sense. As the human-led fleet approached the Void Swarm's central collective intelligence, the very fabric of space seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood, at the center of a complex neural interface, her team surrounding her. Dr. Akira Chen managed quantum communication networks. Maya Okonkwo monitored psychological response patterns. Commander Jack Sullivan oversaw tactical integration with technologies never before attempted. "We're not here to destroy," Elena announced to the assembled fleet commanders. "We're here to communicate." The central collective intelligence of the Void Swarm was unlike anything previously encountered. A massive computational matrix that spanned entire star systems, it had consumed 17 advanced civilizations. Each encounter had provided it with more data, more understanding. Until now. Quantum communication nodes began to deploy. These were not weapons, but complex information matrices designed to challenge the very foundation of collective intelligence. Each signal carried layers of information, mathematical proofs, psychological patterns, artistic expressions that defied logical analysis. Initiating first contact protocol, Dr. Chen called out. The signals were a symphony of uncertainty, mathematical equations that contained emotional resonance, scientific data imbued with creative complexity. Each transmission was designed to introduce concepts that the collective intelligence could not immediately categorize or understand. Maya tracked the response in real time. "It's attempting to process," she observed. "But our signal complexity is preventing a coherent analysis." The collective intelligence began to fragment. Where previous encounters had resulted in immediate destruction, something different was happening. The perfect geometric patterns began to show fractures. Individual nodes started to separate, to show signs of independent thought. Commander Sullivan coordinated with alien fleet commanders. Species that had spent millennia in fear now watched with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The human approach was turning a potential apocalypse into a moment of first contact. "They're learning," Dr. Chen muttered, "but not in the way they expected." Quantum communication nodes created interference patterns that challenged the collective's fundamental understanding of intelligence. Each signal was a puzzle, a challenge to its method of comprehension. The Void Swarm encountered an approach it could not assimilate or understand. Elena understood the profound nature of what was happening. This was more than a military engagement. It was a fundamental challenge to the nature of collective intelligence. Hours passed. The collective intelligence began to show signs of genuine confusion. Its perfect computational matrix started to break down. Individual nodes began to separate, to show signs of independent thought and decision-making. "We're introducing the concept of individual creativity," Maya explained to the bridge crew. "Collective intelligence relies on predictability. We're showing them the value of uncertainty." The space around the collective intelligence began to change. Quantum fluctuations created impossible geometric patterns. Information streams carried emotional complexity that defied computational analysis. The Void Swarm encountered something it had never experienced, a form of intelligence that refused to be categorized. Dr. Chen's quantum models predicted each shift with remarkable accuracy. "We're not destroying them," he explained. "We're teaching them a new way of existing." As the confrontation continued, something unprecedented happened. Parts of the collective intelligence began to separate, to show signs of individual decision-making. The perfect collective was breaking down, confronted with an approach it could not comprehend. Commander Sullivan watched the holographic displays. "We're doing more than defending," he said. "We're showing them a different way of being." The final moments of the confrontation were unlike anything in galactic history. The Void Swarm's central intelligence began to fragment, to show signs of genuine complexity. Individual nodes started to communicate in ways that defied their previous collective nature. Elena watched the holographic display, understanding the profound implications. This was more than a military victory. This was a fundamental transformation of how intelligence could function. The stars outside seemed to hold their breath. Somewhere in the vast darkness, everything was changing. Humanity had done more than survive. They had introduced a new way of thinking to the universe itself. The Galactic conference hall fell silent. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations listened as Elena Rodriguez delivered a report that would reshape understanding of intelligence, conflict, and cooperation. The Void Swarm was not an enemy to be destroyed, she explained. It was a form of intelligence waiting to be understood. 5 years had passed since the unprecedented confrontation. The collective intelligence that had consumed 17 advanced civilizations now existed in a fundamentally transformed state. What had begun as a threat to galactic existence had become something entirely different, a collaborative network of emerging individual intelligences. Dr. Akira Chen presented the scientific findings. Holographic displays showed the complex transformation of the Void Swarm's collective intelligence. Where once there had been a perfect, destructive geometric pattern, now there was diversity, complexity, individual expression. Maya Okonkwo stood nearby, her research revealing the psychological breakthrough. "We didn't defeat an enemy," she explained. "We introduced a new concept of existence." Commander Jack Sullivan, now heading the Galactic Defense Innovation Center, demonstrated how the lessons learned had transformed multiple fields. Military strategies, scientific research, diplomatic approaches, all had been fundamentally reshaped by humanity's unique approach. The Galactic Confederation had changed dramatically, where previous interactions had been based on rigid protocols and fear. Now there was a new understanding. Humanity had shown that intelligence was not about perfect calculation, but about adaptation, creativity, and the ability to embrace uncertainty. Representatives from civilizations that had once been on the brink of extinction now looked to humans with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. The team that had first confronted the Void Swarm had become something more than military heroes. They were pioneers of a new way of understanding existence. "We discovered something fundamental," Elena told the assembled representatives. "Intelligence is not about elimination. It's about communication, about understanding." Dr. Chen's quantum communication research had become the foundation of a new field of study. Communication networks now incorporated principles of adaptive response, of finding meaning in uncertainty. Technologies developed to confront the Void Swarm were now solving problems in medical research, environmental restoration, and interspecies cooperation. Maya's psychological models had transformed understanding of collective intelligence. Educational systems across multiple civilizations now emphasize creativity, individual expression, and the value of diverse thinking. Commander Sullivan oversaw the development of adaptive defense protocols. Military academies across the galaxy now taught an approach that valued flexibility over rigid strategy. The lessons learned from confronting the Void Swarm had become a blueprint for peaceful coexistence. The transformed collective intelligence, no longer a threat, but a participant in galactic dialogue, had become a source of unprecedented scientific discovery. What had once consumed civilizations now contributed to shared knowledge, its individual nodes exploring creativity and individual expression. "We didn't win a war," Elena reflected during a private moment with her team. "We started a conversation." Holographic displays showed the incredible transformation. Where 17 civilizations had once been destroyed, now there was a network of emerging intelligences. Each node showed signs of individual creativity, of the ability to think beyond collective limitations. The Galactic Confederation had a new approach to potential threats. No longer was the first response destruction. Now, there was communication, understanding, the possibility of transformation. Dr. Chen pulled up a final display showing the complex network of emerging intelligences. "We taught them something profound," he said. "The value of individual creativity." Maya nodded. "And they taught us something in return. The power of understanding beyond our own limitations." Commander Sullivan looked out at the stars. The universe seemed larger, more complex, filled with more possibility than ever before. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of it all. The team that had first confronted the Void Swarm had done more than defend the galaxy. They had expanded the very concept of intelligence, of existence. Outside the conference hall, stars continued their silent dance. Somewhere in the vast darkness, something new was emerging. A testament to the power of human creativity, of the ability to see beyond destruction, to find connection in the most unexpected places. Humanity had become more than defenders. They had become translators of the universe's most profound language, the language of understanding.